Hello and welcome back to another episode of Capturing the Intangibles. We were fortunate enough to have a few of us together in person for the first time in a long time, and we decided to dive in a bit deeper to the service-oriented business trend and the supporting technology required to support that operating model. Enjoy and let us know your thoughts. Welcome into another episode of Capturing the Intangibles. As you can tell, this is our first in-person
live capturing of the intangibles.
And it's
signifying the reopening of the business where things are physical and not just virtual anymore.
Finally. I guess so. We're here in Prague, and it was quite a long trip for some of us. An interesting trip, but hopefully this continues and we get to continue to meet like this if we can control Delta and all that. But before anyone asks or thinks, we all had to get tested just yesterday, if it was.
Yes.
So I know we're not technically socially distanced here, but we're all clean, we're all good to go. But
we are in a bubble.
Tested and vaccinated, so.
Yeah, and we couldn't pass up the opportunity to have a conversation and see how it goes live with some of these podcast topics that we wanted to go through. And I thought one thing that we would talk about today, you and I on our last podcast started to get into, let's call it the SaaS economy, right? And how some business models are changing, but I wanted to get into that a little bit more on what it means for us as, technology leaders or developers or product managers. What does that mean for how we're developing or thinking about software moving forward? So let's first start off with sort of defining what we mean by the SaaS economy. So we know that service-oriented models as a whole kind of rule the world today. But what does that really mean? Can someone give me some examples of how that's ruling the world?
Start with the technology leader.
Oh, with me? Oh, thank you. Well, I think, there are different dimensions to the SaaS economy, right? So it starts as how you architect and build software, first of all. I think second is how do you price the service? Third is how you implement it, right? And I think fourth, which is very important, I think, is what's the customer experience of that service. How do you help customers through the journey of consuming the service, right? So, and that's a totally different than what we used to do with the on-premise world. So, but I really define these four categories.
If I want to pick on Massimo's segue into customer experience, things are much more done via ordering things online, also because of the pandemic. Let's say that I order a new earplugs or headphones. It comes through post, but I don't like it. I would like to walk into the nearest store and return it. So my ordering channel is one, and my returning channel is something else. Mm-hmm. And clearly, if your distribution software is SaaS hosted, and if it can support all these seamless, ever-changing needs, customer experiences at the end of the day, leads the digital transformation. So this type of omni-channel experience, SaaS makes it very, very easy.
Yeah, it's interesting, Massimo, especially the way that you went from the architecture to the pricing science behind it to how you implement ultimately what the customer sees. Mm-hmm. It's interesting because I think if you flip that, if you invert that model, that's what caused us to get to that, right?
Exactly.
So we're seeing what you're describing is a service-oriented customer experience, and you came up with a really interesting, was it Home Depot example of anyways, like a metered or consumption-based approach.
Oh yeah, the power tools.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that your power tools were actually. I think that's where it's trailing to in the future. But right now, I think Home Depot announced that all their tools are disabled by default. If you were to steal them, for example, they're useless, right? Mm-hmm. They have to activate them in the store, kind of like leaving the cell phone store, the mobile store, with a cell phone. Mm-hmm. It doesn't do anything until it's actually activated.
Oh, wow.
And so they're actually going to activate these devices, power drills, belt sanders, that sort of thing, on purchase, and then you can go ahead and use that. But, kind of looking at the writing on the wall, it definitely seems like whether it's pro-consumer or anti-consumer, the trend is working towards, how do we actually develop a recurring revenue model based on the usage of even everyday items, right, in our lives. So very, very interesting area, but it talks a lot about the experience of consumption as well, right?
But do you think businesses that are inevitably or already moving towards these consumption-based models, right, or the service-oriented models, do you think they're ready from an operations and technology perspective to truly take advantage of that? Or what do we see with like some of the customers we deal with today?
Yeah, I think, what Vignes was just saying, the example, well, not everybody can do that. Maybe you have to buy in the store something, but you can't return it back electronically, right? So, or the reverse, right? So, or they can do all of them, and the combinations. And that really, we don't see that everybody can do that.
I think that
definitely that maturity is not there.
That goes back to the cliche term of digital transformation. I mean, some customers are able to transform their business to suit the modern needs. Some customers, they are too invested in the past that it's that much more difficult for them. And that's where the modern EAP platforms and so on, our job is to enable customers for that transformation journey.
Yeah, but the thing is that there is a lot of also depth in technology and software that has been implemented that corporations are really scared to remove it and move on with new technologies. At the end of the day, if you do digital transformation, you want to have a new SaaS business and support it, you will need also new technology to do that. And you really have to move on and you have to look for new things. Otherwise, for what you have implemented the last 10 years or 20 years, that's not going to give you that customer experience, that service-oriented level that you need.
Yeah, it's almost like we talk. It's kind of cliche a little bit to say sometimes, but your technology or the way your operations or all these things behind the scenes have to always evolve to your business model, right? And if the world is saying the business model is everyone wants to move to consumption-based or metered approach to everything, we're not just talking SaaS services right now, right?
Yes.
But if you have to do that and your business is not ready for it, then obviously it's got some kind of bottom line impact, I would think. Like your profitability can't be as good if you're running legacy systems that now I have no idea what it's costing me to deliver this good or this service, but yet I'm having to charge for it in this way.
Yeah, so I'm very reminded of this very cliched proverb. I mean, if you always did, if you always do what you always did, you will always get what you got.
Right.
So obviously, unless or until you change the process to grow, as you said, the bottom line won't improve. Yeah.
Well, it presents a material risk, right? So if you're given an option to buy new software today that you own the life cycle, the management, the IT, the infrastructure, everything for, while you do have control, right? There's a sense of ownership of controlling your own destiny. You're also kind of constraining your ability to innovate or adapt very, very quickly. And that's kind of what we're seeing. People have to make that decision about what is the trade-off. So we talked about Home Depot a second ago. I think the consumer games market is a really good example. So you have companies like Valve. They make something called the Steam Powered Store. And that's where you can download and buy games, right? You used to go to a local shop, GameStop, Best Buy. You bought a physical copy of a game. It was yours, right?
Yeah.
They couldn't take it back. Today, it's a lot different. You exchange money online, you pay through online services, you download the game. The concept of refunds, the concept of ownership is fundamentally much different in this sort of life and this model. So they've been doing this for about 15 years now. And so, yes, you can get refunds just like you see on the Apple Store, for example, right? Within 24 hours or something like that, right?
That's very nice, yeah.
But at the same time, if, for example, you were to violate the terms of service of that vendor, they reserve the right to terminate your entire account, right? And that's when it becomes clear that you do not actually own these games. You own a license to play them until you violate those terms. And so the concept of ownership becomes very, very shaky. And so when you look at that, I mean, it does present a risk to companies as well when you start to think about this games model that we see today in the enterprise market. The flip side of that is there has to be a tremendous ROI here because I can't just simply move my stuff to the cloud, give up my ownership stake and interest in running of my business and become beholden to a vendor that may decide I don't want to run this anymore for you, right? So there has to be a trade-up in terms of ROI, and I think that tends to be continuous innovation.
But the example also, like today is, I just bought Formula One for PS4 and I want to buy PS5. So if I buy digital now, it's already working for PS5 later, right? So if that's the experience that now the vendor is giving to the gamers you say, hey, don't worry about the PS5, that you can get it now, you can start on PS4, but you will continue to play on a PS5.
You used to have to drive a car to the store to buy your driving game
Yep.
and then drive home.
Yep.
Now, all you have to do is just download it from the
Yeah,
convenience of your
download
own
it,
living room.
and do I own the game? Yeah, I own the rights to do the game on any device later. That's what I like, that experience. But another experience I don't like is more on the retail side, where you buy things, from certain, brands, and I because I travel a lot, I may buy on the store in the US or in Italy or in the Netherlands or in other. And when I go back to the stores and say, oh, what's your account? Then they have literally as many countries and many entries on my profile, right? So, and these are the things that, you provide a service online because I can return it online or I can buy it online, but I have 5 entries, right? So there are things I think as a customer experience, people need to start to look at how to have the customer profile, all the data of the customer there, so that wherever you consume the service, it doesn't matter, I have access to your profile. I think that it's not yet solved I've seen a lot of companies, especially in retail.
Yeah.
And it's you're getting into more of the last thing, or you flip it. The first thing that you need to consider is the architecture side. There's something that you were saying things like trade-off, and how my interpretation of that is like it immediately seems negative to the concept of ownership.
Yeah.
But aren't we like talking about, when we're talking about SaaS, we're talking about cloud concepts, right? And why is it important for cloud and SaaS to be so valuable? So it's like trade-off versus opportunity.
So I actually knew I was going to set you off by saying trade-off because it sounds so inherently negative, but I actually think that it represents actually a fundamental part of the conversation here, which is for 30 years, software was delivered on floppies, on CDs, on DVDs, and so on, right? So we came from this mindset and this delivery model of there was ownership, right? There was no internet to deliver this from, right? It used to be that you would share floppies and share them around, right? And then people started shipping these things, the software, all around the world to people that bought subscriptions to it. Where we are today as a service is disconnected from the product and the concept of ownership that we started with 20 or 30 years ago. Wow, 20 years ago is only 2000, 30 or 40 years ago, right? And so just because that's where we started as products, physical products that you could actually touch, feel, install, and everything that you owned, doesn't necessarily mean that that continues to evolve or we maintain that premise over here. So I actually don't see it as a negative. I actually see that a lot of people have that continuity of thinking that if I'm moving simply to the cloud, I still maintain my ownership. And I think people get into this trap that is an inherent risk. And it's really not the case. So it's not a negative thing. I think that they need to be sensitive to looking at what is a service. And I think we're being highly specific about the use of the word service here. That these services are giving you infinite scalability. They're giving you infinite compute. They're giving you infinite updates and bug fixes and new features and everything like that.
Yeah.
Something that doesn't exist in a physical product that you ship a 1.0 of and then ship those floppies out, right? Where we are today is not a continuation of the product-based delivery model and philosophy.
Again, going back to the customer experience, you mentioned everything like infinite storage, continuous upgrade. Again, on the customer experience front, it's ubiquitous access. You can access that service regardless of where you are. I'm in Prague, I can still access all my subscription services that I own, for example, in the Netherlands, like reading a newspaper, for example. Right? So the customer experience, again, is a unquestionable win-win in the SaaS economy. That for the customer, he gets at the end of the day, he or she at the end of the day, gets much more value for the buck than what it used to be. There's no question of that.
But then it's a culture change inside the company, because if you were doing customer experience from an on-premise model, that is totally different when you're going to do a SaaS model. So you have to have a culture shift and change of how you help the customer. The customer expects to be helped 24/7, So that's going to be very, very important that the company works on the change of the culture as well.
Yeah, and the trade-off concept, I think that's general population immediately, human nature, trade-off equals threat. But it's not a trade-off versus opportunity. What we're trying to say is trade-off equals opportunity. But if you go, so I want to get back into the architecture just to put a bow on this, right? Is that we know it's very clear that there is value in the consumer experience side on what you're trying to sell. That's well validated in everything we do and buy today. What's the value in, say, the cloud services to make all this possible, to make sure that your operations run in a way that's profitable for your business, right?
Yeah.
Because we hear about, it's really a why cloud discussion. We've heard about, you're always up to date. You're not managing the cost of your on-premise resources anymore. But what is really the value?
Yeah, I think, if you start again from reversing, the customer experience, to really provide a very good customer experience, you need to have insights how the customers are buying, consuming the service, right? To do that, you need more compute power, you need more data, you need more AI or artificial intelligence services and business intelligence, insights in the process and so on. So you need to have all these capabilities to offer a better customer experience. And to do that, you need to have the infinite scale, the CPUs, the storage, and everything what the cloud needs. And that infrastructure, you cannot own yourself. That you have to run that in the cloud. And the other thing is you need the segregation of duties. So if you are architecting for offering 10 services, it cannot be a monolith that when you upgrade it, then everything is down, right? So everything has to run 24/7. And when you update one thing, you will only update one thing and not the entire monolith. And that thing is zero downtime, meaning that nobody notices. And then you can have new capabilities. But at the end of the day, for me, to offer a very good customer experience, the cloud has a perfect platform to have data, compute, AI all together, and I know more about my customers and I can serve it better.
So let me ask you guys then. So I think we're still at a stage where a lot of enterprise vendors, they prioritize stability, dependability, clear expectations, right? So as a regular person, when I go to Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter, any new feature, I'm not counting down the days until this gets released into a pre-production environment. And then next month after that, I get to finally use this and operationalize, like, oh my God, I have this new hashtag feature in Twitter, right? And obviously that's not the model in the consumer market, but we are still at that stage across the entire vendor spectrum where we see a lot more concerted effort and cautiousness in making sure that this is done in a highly controlled, dependable way. Do you think that this market is going to evolve into that sort of CI/CD pipeline methodology?
Yeah, the maturity, I think, is a very good question. I mean, if you do a change and you can't send an invoice to a customer, you don't get paid, you're going to have a big problem, right? So you don't want this disruption. If your PO process or sales order process is just stopped, it's
a disaster.
really is a disaster. It's not like an hashtag missing on LinkedIn.
Correct.
Who cares, right? So this is really impacting business and money. So so there has to be a maturity throughout the entire software organization, from the developer to architect to the customer success manager to the implementation product manager, where this urgency of you're building something very important and that can disrupt a business process, that urgency has to be built in the core of the culture. Once you have that, then you can automate a process where when I change something in the invoicing processing and I can update, I know that it's going to be working. And if it's not working, then you're going to fix it immediately. Right?
What about features though? So bug fixes, I mean, we have hot fixing and patching already today, right? That I think everyone expects, right? If there's a bug right now, we can fix it. We're not waiting until we can deliver this out to a pre-prod environment, right? What about features though?
So I think, Massimo hit the nail on the head. It's not apples to apples comparison of a business software upgrade CI/CD and a normal, retail access software. It goes back to the original part of our conversation. Are the customers ready? Like, for example, if you sold an on-prem software, out of 10 customers, 9 may have customized the business process for their local needs. But in a SaaS scenario, if 10 out of 10 customers follow the standard, proven, efficient, optimized business process that is delivered to you as part of the SaaS solution, and if you are doing a background flip, then it's okay. The problem comes when you still continue your on-premise mentality when you are using a SaaS software and still customizing a SaaS software and deviating with all kind of modulations. That is a recipe for disaster. But as long as every customer is matured enough to offer the standard solution, comes to a great extent possible as is, then the onus is on the vendor, on the software provider, to make sure nothing breaks and we can provide that guarantee to our customers. So half of the answer to that question lies on the customer's readiness and maturity.
So what I'm hearing here is that you hit on something that what's the value of SaaS is really the opportunity to get access to new tech that you just simply can't run, forget cost effectively, just simply can't run on premise, right?
Yep.
You don't lose any sort of flexibility. It's just a different paradigm shift in how you implement that. But then we start to talk about these new revenue potentials. But really, the extreme amount of profitability that you can get, not only in just the revenue, but the cost savings, the economies of scale, the on demand when I need something versus when I don't, you're really talking about a completely different business model. So I would encourage everyone that we talk to, and especially in our conversations with customers and prospects, is like, yes, we do want to emphasize that customer experience, but let's get to this is why your architecture matters, right?
Yeah.
It's because all four of those points aren't possible, and that's why an opportunity, not necessarily a trade-off.
We can edit
I knew he was going back to the trade-off.
I knew it. Yeah.
Well, guys, I really enjoyed this. I think you had a great idea. Hopefully, we're going to get to continue this, and maybe every city we bring in some of our team members. But I really enjoy getting to do this in person, guys. So much better.
Yeah, and this is, by the way, this is the Prague office. You don't see a lot, but maybe we're going to share more videos from the Prague office.
We'll live stream a tour maybe a little later.
Yeah.
We will do that.
From the Charles Bridge.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.
Take care, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.